Alrighty, hello everyone. Welcome to Wednesday, March 15th. This is a wasmCloud community meeting. We got a pretty fun agenda for you today. Let me go ahead and get that shared so that everybody can. Oh, hold on a second. I have the live stream open in another window and it's throwing me off. Wait, I really don't know where it's coming from. Oh no, is it Liam?
I don't think
it's one of us.
Okay, nope, it's me. Sorry about that. I figured it out. Okay, anyway, so the agenda today, we're going to start with, I'm going to do a little bit of demo on link definitions and link names, meaning usage, some powerful things you can do. It's actually what powered a really cool thing about our scale talk a couple of days ago. So I want to talk about that. I'm going to throw it over to Roman, who's going to give a wasmCloud component model update, where we are with wasmCloud. And then to Taylor to talk about proper usage of our wasmCloud GitHub projects and kind of rolling through a little example there. We'll talk about Scale, the conference that Taylor and I went to this past weekend, and a little bit of a call out there, and then talk about the hackathon that Cosmonic officially is putting on, but we're actually going to be doing some office hours today. So without further ado, let's go ahead and get started. So I want to talk a little bit about link definitions and link names. So throughout the purpose of creating wasmCloud applications, we talk a lot about these link definitions. And most of the time when people are using them, their biggest purpose, their main purpose is to link an actor to a capability provider at runtime, optionally providing some configuration for that specific link. So the link does two things in that main purpose. One, it tells the wasmCloud runtime across the whole, or any wasmCloud runtime across the lattice, that this actor is allowed to communicate with this provider. And then the configuration step is what's really important for setting up things like runtime config, like for an HTTP server, hey, you need to listen on this port in order to receive an HTTP request, or for the Redis key value store, hey, you need to connect for the Redis connector, you need to connect to this Redis URL. So this is how you're able to do runtime configuration. What you may have built into your application before you change based on environment, that is all kind of done at runtime. But one specific part of link definitions, I feel like we most of the time just gloss over, and that is the link name. And I want to talk about that specifically today because it's probably not needed in, I would say, approximately 90% of the use cases for wasmCloud. You don't have to use it. You'll see that it's actually here on the wasmCloud dashboard. You see a lot of defaults down the tabs here for providers and for link definitions, because default works most of the time. Normally, you don't have to supply a link name. So a link name, as defined in our documentation, is a logical separation that you can run different instances of capability providers on. Most of the time, if you're just using the HTTP server, you can run it on default, you can link on default, and that all works fine and good. But for some specific use cases, you can actually do some really cool things by having additional link names. So let me go ahead and show you one of those examples. So I have the key value counter application here. This is just our example that we use all the time. And what I actually have going on, I'm just going to rearrange things a little bit. I have an HTTP server provider that's running on my local machine and on a Raspberry Pi. I'll actually show you that in a second. And then I have the Redis key value store provider running on my local machine. So we know that the capabilities that a KV counter needs is HTTP server and key value. So I can actually link these up just with their default values. And so now we basically told wasmCloud, hey, this WebAssembly actor is allowed to communicate with this HTTP server and this Redis database. The thing that I didn't really talk about, and we don't do for a lot of our demos, I've actually set up this HTTP server with the link name of local. And there is something really cool that you can do with this. So I'm going to switch over to, let me actually just share my whole screen. It might be easier because I'm going to go back and forth. All right, that should come up okay. So this KV counter is linked to HTTP server on local and Redis on local, another alternate view in the wasmCloud dashboard. This is pretty much what you're used to. So locally, what I've done is created a listener on localhost 8080. And so I can curl, or 8000, I can curl the counter at this localhost endpoint and get back the counter. So this is, this is the way that we work with the KV counter. Actually, this is the new and improved one that has the UI. So why don't I go ahead and use that? I can, of course, now I'm going to do it and then, okay, it's loading, but I can hit localhost 8000 and I can actually see that I'm hitting this actor. Now, let's say I'm doing this as a development process. I'm running everything on local, I'm developing, and now it's time to move this application to like a QA or like a staging environment. Basically, I want to take this from my local machine and put it in the cloud. So you can actually use link names to do this in a gradual way, even if you're doing this imperatively, like through the wasmCloud dashboard or through Cosmonic. I can actually create multiple links to the same capability using link names. So this HTTP server is running on local. This HTTP server that's running in Cosmonic is running on the link name default. And so I can actually create an additional link to this other provider on the same capability. And this is something that may not be intuitively obvious that you can do that, but the thing that allows you to do this is the link name. So now I can continue to hit my KV counter by curling the localhost endpoint, or I can hit the KV counter by actually going to this URL, the URL that Cosmonic is exposing. And I'm actually using the bucket community. That's why the counter is a different number. So now this is effectively how you can do all kinds of canary testing, kind of like an A/B failover to use different link names and have them all route to the same actor, the same database. And the cool thing is that again, there's nothing in your code that specifically needs to call this out. If I take a look at the code in key value counter, no matter what link name I use, it's delivered to the same handle request function that we set up in the key value counter. So that's one way that you can use link names. Another way that you can use link names is not from a provider to an actor, but instead, the other direction. So pointing from the key value counter to a provider that has a different link name. Now, if we look at the code, the way that we create this increment request, we create a key value sender, a new key value sender, and then call increment on it. This is just interacting with a key value store. We fulfill it with Redis at runtime, but we could use the, any other key value provider as well. The process for using a different link name with a provider call, you actually do have to specifically call out. And that's with the new with link function on any of the senders that you have for a capability provider. So doing key value sender new is effectively the same as doing key value sender new with link on default. So we're creating a new sender to the provider on link name default, and then sending it the increment request. Now, if I were to do the same thing that I was doing before, like with a local host endpoint, I would have to specify the link name as local. Now, what this is really useful for, what we've actually done before in a couple of demos, is have an inbound and an outbound NATS connection and use a different NATS configuration for each one. So we publish on different topics than what we're receiving on, which is pretty sweet. But really the ability for publishing to different providers lets you do fancy things like, okay, I'm going to store this information in more than one database with the same capability. So link names are kind of there so you can provide additional configuration to those capability providers. So that was most of what I wanted to talk about today. And I really hope that this would generate a couple of questions talking about link names, because again, most of the time when you're developing with wasmCloud, you can just use the default link name. You're not doing anything that requires multiple, but this really lets you do, the different link names really lets you do cool things like wire up a public endpoint with the same HTTP server, and then, eventually get rid of that link locally. So now it's all just wired up with public endpoint, and my local server is just, it's free to be deleted. So any questions on link names? Aha, I just saw the comment. I typed 127.0.0.0 instead of 0.0.1. Cool. Thanks, Kevin. All right. Well, what I really hope to do is put together a couple of examples for this in our examples repository. So, the example of routing to different databases and, doing gradual A/B testing from one environment to another is really a neat aspect of link names that is kind of sitting there in the background if you didn't know about the feature. So love to actually get that formalized in a couple of examples and get that out to you all. So that was what I had in terms of the demo. What I'm going to go ahead and do next thing on our agenda is talking about wasmCloud component model updates. So Roman, I think I'll go ahead and throw it over to you. Let me give you screen sharing so you can share if you want.
Yeah, thank you. Try that.
Hey, Roman, you're a little quiet.
Oh, sorry.
Okay.
Is that better? Yeah.
Yeah, maybe a little.
Oh, here we go. That better.
Roman, that's well.
Right.
Yeah.
Well, that's too much. Hey everyone. So as you probably know already, I'm working on this wasmCloud Rust host SDK. And we're also working currently on, Kevin actually is working on wrapping that host in a NIF to actually use that in OTP. There's a draft PR for that. Take a look if you're interested. But so one of the most interesting things that has been happening in the SDK currently is that we switched to the latest and greatest from wasmTime and all the WASI Preview 2 work. And we actually now have support for components. So actors can now be both a WebAssembly module and a WebAssembly component. And we have a nice actor abstraction for it. So it's enum, but you don't actually need to care about the low-level details of this because essentially you can compile, after constructing a runtime, you can then compile your WebAssembly and you can just call whatever function you want in that WebAssembly actor. So it could be a component, it could be a module, it doesn't really matter. The runtime is going to turn that for you. And essentially, this is where you would call things like HTTP server, handle requests, right? And you pass some payload or none if there's no payload to pass. One thing to note here, by the way, I'm looking at my local documentation right now, but the current development documentation is actually now published on wasmcloud.github.io /wasmcloud, mind the capital C. So that's very useful, I think, for development. Until at least we have the crate published. I actually noticed we already had some crates published before, so probably gonna have to think about versioning there. But yeah, I'm doing some changes, by the way, to the API. You can notice that there's quite a few generic bounds disappeared now in the newest iteration. So there's a PR coming for this, also making this a bit easier to use. So in general, I'm just working on polishing the API right now. But one of the things I can show, for example, is runtime. So you can now construct a runtime given just a simple callback for handling host calls. Right, so it's going to use just default built-in handler implementations, and you can just pass it an arbitrary handle for invocation. By the way, yes, we also introduced, I introduced the struct for the host invocation, so it now contains all the fields, so also the signature is a bit smaller, so things are easier to implement and maintain. So are there any questions so far about the implementation, perhaps, or the SDK?
Roman, I just want to highlight some of the things you dropped so casually. So basically, what we're working on here is a Rust host SDK. So how do I load actors basically within wasmCloud? That's what it does, and it provides a very high-level API that Roman was showing, and he's just refined that even more So it's super easy for embedders to call this top level, high level, like invoke this actor. And the high level piece doesn't even need to know if it's working with a module or if it's working with a component. We've pub components before, but basically it's a different binary ABI that provides high level types so that I can take different components, maybe of different libraries, and link them together. I can also take things that weren't built for wasmCloud, for example. This is a secret for watching what will happen next week at wasm.io, but link that with another component that lets me run it within wasmCloud, which is very, very powerful. So basically one of the first places that you can use was a component model support without doing a lot of heavy lifting yourself. And Roman's made that super easy. It's on the preview 2 prototyping branch using, preview 2 draft, blah, 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 all the like experimental, please don't ship this to production kind of verbiage. But this is one of those first places that we're able to dig in and experiment. Brooks?
Yeah, I wanted to ask a couple really simple questions. Because I know that there are a couple of different WebAssembly engines. What WebAssembly engine is running under this, Roman?
Yeah, so that's wasmTime. And we also use all the latest developments from the Bytecode Alliance. So for things like providing the component-enabled WASI. So it's all it's a bit tricky to set up, but we are making it simpler. So
okay,
I mean it's tricky to set up for the developers of the host, but it should be easy to consume, right? So that's kind of the whole point of this.
Okay, nice. And I wanted to ask, I know that you mentioned, if anybody had any questions about implementation, do you have any examples that people could look at for like, what does it look like to instantiate a runtime and then run an actor?
Yeah, absolutely. So I actually, since the beginning of this repo, I've been maintaining the example. Like there's an echo example, which is just running the echo actor. But also, good place to look at could be the test. So there is a component and there's an actor, a module. Both are compiled at runtime. They're compiled using just cargo functionality. So you can also look at those. But like if you would want to see so this is basically what you would do with wash, right? Where you would sign your component, right? Build it and sign it, and then that's what it takes to instantiate a runtime. So you just pass it some function which handles host calls. In this case, it's just doesn't do anything. But this is basically where you would invoke nats, to send your host call over nats and get back a response. And so, and then you can just read your actor. So in this case, this is going to, read the bytes, parse the bytes, compile the component, compile the actor, either a command or a module, right? And then you can just do actor.call, like I showed earlier. Hopefully this is big enough. Maybe I'll zoom in a bit. Right, so but this is basically what it takes to instantiate the runtime, load up an actor, but precompile it, right, and just call. You can also call an actor multiple times. So actor is meant to be a long-lived object, right? So it's easy to, it's cheap to call it, right? So it's already precompiled in memory, and you could, store it somewhere, maybe, just reuse it. And
I'm just gonna maybe drive this point home because this is my understanding, but tell me if I'm wrong. So all of this stuff is it's the wasmCloud library you would interact with if you were writing a wasmCloud host or looking at contributing on our side. But from the wasmCloud or really WebAssembly now application developer standpoint, they don't really need to interact with these primitives, right? Like it's the same kind of process for you write a WebAssembly module and then you deploy it onto wasmCloud. You don't have to deal with the runtime stuff. Is that right?
Yeah, so this is just wasmCloud specific, just for the host. This runs any normal WebAssembly modules and components. Of course, we use the wasmCloud API in the component model, for example, right? Or the API in the wasm-bus API in the modules, right? So I guess Wash takes care of that, and then basically just take a component or a module and just run it in wasmCloud.
Yeah, Brooks, that's a good question. Said differently, Kevin has been working on creating a NIF that embeds this host crate. So before we were using a third-party library made by an amazing maintainer, Tessie, but that was a general purpose Elixir library, and there was quite a bit of like, and you know this because you did a lot of the performance analysis, some copying across the NIF boundary. There's complexity in the breadth of the API that needs to be provided for a general purpose library versus something that's very specific to wasmCloud's use case. And so with this host SDK, we're able to get something that's specific to what we're using, eliminate boundaries across function calls between like the NIF and what happens on the Rust side of things, and still be able to take advantage of all the existing stuff that we've done within the OTP host, all the networking and things. Brooks?
Oh, my hand is just continually staying up. Well, I did have one more question, and then I will finally yield the time. So I know that, you know, we talk about this as the wildly profuse bleeding edge. It's very, very new stuff. With the status that we're in right now and implementing it as a NIF in the host, how do we feel about, you know, we're about to release wasmCloud 0.61. This seems to have full backwards compatibility with regular wasmCloud actors, so that's great. How do we feel about releasing this in the next version of wasmCloud, or maybe even like the next version? Like, are we pinned to a really specific like Git hash or something in wasm time and using like the Rust, I don't know, Rust super nightly? Like, are there any concerns there in terms of breaking changes and actually releasing this in wasmCloud?
I'll defer to Kevin on that one.
Oh yeah, I feel bad because I was just gonna make a joke. I was gonna suggest that the version of all the stuff that we're using is pinned on the hard drive in my desk, so we should be safe.
Yeah, we should be totally fine. We're using Rust Nightly, like the latest Nightly. That's got some bug fixes for the component model, and so a lot of the pieces and parts here are obviously moving very quickly, especially because we're not the only ones that are driving to a very cool demo for wasm.io, which is next Wednesday and Thursday. And so basically, it's pretty active right now. So as far as components go, we might be a little bit more slower to release that because we know that it's missing some things that we wanted, but we were willing to, like, you know, toothpick and duct tape together for a demo. But for the like route of, hey, we've got existing actors, they're compiled to wasm32 unknown, like just a plain old core module, I do see that as a very soon thing. I'm not going to say it's next OTP release because, hey, what if we have a patch release, right? That's all cool, but it does feel very close. We need to get some feedback, and that's definitely why we're like, hey, y'all, we're making a thing, and it's actually looking like it's coming together really fast. So yeah, would love other people to get some eyes on it.
Well, hey, I know that we've discussed a couple of, rc1.alpha.experimental. I know that we've discussed a couple of ways to bring experimental or new features into the wasmCloud host. Maybe when we're still like, we don't want them to become mainstream features because they're still likely to like have breaking API changes, and we want to release stable things in the wasmCloud host. But I would be very happy to have a discussion maybe in the next, I mean, we can do it now, but we have more stuff on the agenda. Maybe at the end of this call where we can talk about having a feature flag for wasmCloud where, you know, you can run with components. You have to run it with an environment variable enabled to kind of tick that box, and the API is likely to change. But I mean, I would be really happy to have that in the wasmCloud host, especially with the backwards compatibility of the notes. Yeah, exactly the same way Bailey just put in the chat, which Bailey, you can say it. I don't have to read it, but
Yeah. So
Yeah.
basically right now, this host SDK enables the component model flag on wasmTime on the upstream wasm runtime that we embed. Roman?
Yeah, also the SDK itself has a component model feature flag as well. And it's absolutely possible to also, like for example, we could, if you were to use the component model flag, then we'd use the latest wasm time. And if you didn't, we could use the latest table, for example. Right, so that's absolutely possible to do as well.
Nice. Yeah, I love the idea of having that discussion because I don't want to hold something so cool back forever while we wait for like an arbitrary point of stability. Cool. All right, I totally monopolized a lot of that time to ask a ton of questions. Does anybody else have any questions for Roman and Bailey? All right, general claps for you all. This is really awesome work. I'm so excited to see it come across the line. All right, let's see. I knew that Taylor was coming in. Taylor, I see you. Are you ready to talk about our GitHub projects and show us some cool stuff?
Yep. Now that I have that, you gave me sharing permissions just in time, Brooks. I think this is the right one. Yes, okay. Yeah, that's the share. Okay. Hi, everyone. This is your local friendly community wrangler here again. Here to talk to you about projects, which we mentioned before, and I just want to mention one more time. So buckle in and stay ready for all this. Okay, so what we're doing, I just want to go back and review what we're doing with GitHub projects, and I wanted to see if people liked what we were doing. And Brooks brought up the really good suggestion that as we talk about it one more time before we start adopting it everywhere, that I should like show how this could work. Show how this could work like when we're using this for real. So like what we're expecting like maintainers of projects to do, and then what people in the community can see and look at inside of these projects. So I'm just going to do like 2 issues, like what happens through here to show you like what we're doing and how we expect this to be used. So what happens is anything that's new comes straight, PRs and issues comes into this triage section. And we're able to come click on this and like get the view through here. And I put all of our current ones on there because I wanted to make sure we had triaged them all into the right buckets, even though we've talked about it. So like right here, we have this idea of like, oh, like, can I do something with like common typos and do all that? And there's like aliases or like spelling harder, you know, like Brooks said he didn't want to learn how to spell. So essentially this issue looks like, okay, we know what it is. It's well scoped. Somebody could take it. So I can just move this to like to do, which means it is open and ready for someone to take. And then over here, which we might have, I'm going to see if there's one that's actually more of like a discussion. I don't know if we have one left on here, maybe this one, but if not, I have one that I can pull out canned. So okay, yeah, this one's pretty straightforward too. He's just saying this is another one that this is Brooks. Basically, if Brooks wrote it, I don't have to worry about it, is what I'm learning here. And so this one is also pretty much just in to do. Now, let me show you one that I was working on this morning actually with Brooks as we were going through this, about one that might require some more discussion or isn't necessarily fully scoped. And that's this one where we discovered a weird bug. Turns out it's Tokyo. We have no idea why. That's causing the WebAssembly modules to pull incorrect sizes. So yeah, we have no idea why that's happening, but like this isn't super well scoped. Someone couldn't come in who's looking for like new, like they wanted to get involved with Wash or whatever. And so we said, this is still in discussion. Now, if you're like an advanced Wash user, of which many people in this call are, this is totally open for you to go try to look at and figure out what in the world is happening here, because it's a weird one. But like, those are the kinds of things that go into discussion, like, oh, hey, we're working through this RFC, we're going through this stuff, and it goes right here. And then you come over and you say, you can take a look at these and you say, okay, these are all the to-dos. These are things that could need work. And so especially if it's an issue, you can come here and say, hey, you know what, like I want to be able to consolidate those 2 commands. So you can look at it and then just you can come here to the comments and mention like, hey, I'd like to take this. And I don't think in GitHub still we can like assign you unless you're part of like the wasmCloud org, but we'll basically note that it's ready to go and you're working on it, and we'll move it in progress so that people know that this is being worked on and no one else takes it. And then it goes over to done. And then this gets cleaned up every once in a while if I set up the workflows right, which I can't remember if I did. So that's how this is going to work. You can and it should be easy to access for every single thing. So if we go to Wash, and we see here we have these projects up at the top, you'll see that it's linked to that same board we were at before. So then you're able to come in and take a look at it. You can also see them viewed here, grouped by tags. So if you want to see like which things are bugs, which things are enhancements, and so on, you're able to come in here and see it viewed, grouped basically by like any milestone we put them in. We haven't really used the milestones yet. I set them up. We might not use them though. But you'll still be able to see everything grouped together by tag or label, I should say. So anyway, that's the big overview of that. I'm going to go ahead and make sure there was nothing in chat that actually had to do with me. Looks like we were talking about water. So, okay. Yeah, doesn't look like there's anything there right now that we need to talk about. Any other questions from the audience? Great. I love silence. It means I either bored you all to death or you're all enthusiastically agreed, and I always like to pretend it's the latter. Thank you for coming on this journey with me through projects. Back to you, Brooks.
Thank you, Taylor. Speaking of, if you really enjoy Taylor talking and having him talk at you and not having the opportunity to ask him questions, we actually, Taylor and I went to Scale, which is Southern California Linux Expo. Yeah. Last weekend. I'm wearing the shirt right now. It was a lot of fun. We met a couple of cool people and had some fun doing some talks. What I will share is just the links really quick to our 2 talks. I'm going to throw them in the chat. This one is Taylor's with timestamp and everything. Taylor's talk that he did on Friday, WebAssembly, or Recovering Kubernetes Engineers' View of the Future. This is at the co-located Kubernetes Community Day, and I think people had a lot of fun with this one. Did you have any like high-level snippet you want to say for this one, Taylor?
Yeah, if you're one of the people who came from the Kubernetes space and or are still running Kubernetes services in production, which is probably a lot of people, and you want to use wasmCloud with it, this shows you exactly how to do it with Cosmonic or with normal wasmCloud. I did it with Cosmonic. I mean, I could literally whip it up right now, but yeah, I'm not gonna promise anything. Anyway, so the so yeah, you're completely welcome to try anything I actually did in this talk, but that's the big one, is that I show Kubernetes working with this like live and failing over between things like my laptop and a Cosmonic hosted wasmCloud host, and then a bunch of hosts running in Kubernetes. And so like, it's a fun one. It's worth watching, at least for the demo. If you're here, you probably can skip some of the first part where I talk about what WebAssembly is and what wasmCloud is, and go to the back half where I'm talking about all the Kubernetes stuff and some of my predictions of the future, which I'm going to laugh how badly they age within a year.
And Taylor, you just used the Helm chart that we have in our OTP repo mostly for this, right? You just provided some values.
Yes, I did. I found some bugs when I was doing it, and those bugs are already released as the latest chart version. So you can do exactly what I'm doing here pretty easily. And then we're also looking at just a tease of this. Eventually, we're going to add all this to automatically happen inside of Cosmonic if you want to join to Cosmonic nodes. I have a nice little script that can do it for you at this point. So we'll be showing that at a workshop next week, and then people can look at it.
Nice. Well, yeah. So this one's super fun. I think, by the way, I'm linking to like timestamps and stuff, but I think that Scale will actually kind of slice this up by talk and publish like the individual videos. So we'll get that out as well as soon as that comes out. And then later the next day, Taylor and I actually did a joint talk, which was pretty fun. We've done a couple of these so far. This one was really aimed at the, the Linux developer, someone who has seen WebAssembly as something that you can play with, something that's a toy or works in really limited domains. And we showed, obviously, with wasmCloud, how that can be a lot easier to get into now, and the real kind of applications that you can build with it. So I'll send this one as well. There's a ton of activity in the chat that I'm not going to read, so don't freak out. And it was, both of these were really fun. I don't really have anything to say here other than maybe the same call out from Taylor, that anybody who's seen wasmCloud before, you can probably skip about halfway through the talk to see the fun demo. I showed off a really similar demo to the beginning of the community call, where I had key value counter on local and then swapped it all to the cloud, and then went on from there. But we had a lot of fun with this conference, and it was great to meet some people in person who are interested in the technology. I'm probably not going to spur too many questions from that, so I'll just move on to our last agenda item really quick. I know that for the, Cosmonic is putting on the Dev Post Hackathon for distributed WebAssembly applications. It's completely a wasmCloud compliant application that you can build and submit. And I know that a lot of people in the wasmCloud community are looking at that and looking to contribute their solutions as something for the hackathon. And I just wanted to call out that we are actually going to be holding office hours today from 3 to 4. Let me double check. I think it's that time. Yep, from 3 to 4 p.m. Eastern time. So it's going to be about an hour after this call wraps up. We're going to be doing it in the Cosmonic Discord, which you can join just on the Cosmonic site if you haven't done it before. But I just wanted to call that out to the community. If you've been running into anything, we're going to just have free time to talk about hackathon submissions and what people have been working on. So looking forward to see you all there. All right, well, that is all that I had for the planned agenda. Why don't we move on to free time now? This is great for anything WASM, wasmCloud, WASM components, anything in the general ecosystem that anyone would like to discuss. Bailey.
I was actually curious about the questions that you or Taylor got during Scale. Like, what were some of the things that people were talking to you about?
Yeah, Taylor can, I think during the Friday session, we got a couple of Kubernetes specific questions, but all I remember from Saturday is getting really awesome questions that we had really good answers to with wasmCloud, and it kind of felt like we had audience plants. I'll be honest, but like I remember somebody asked, each WebAssembly actor that you have, or each wasmCloud actor, how can I provide configuration for this? Like, can I change that? Which of course the answer is link definitions and things you can change at runtime. Taylor, I feel like we had a really good question about security. Like,
yeah,
what was that?
It was a follow on to that same question that you were just asking. You were saying, well, do I have to manually set up this for every single WebAssembly module I'm using, and how do I know that that's okay to use? And I went through the fact that we have the security in depth with the different layers of invocation signing, actor and provider signing, all the different levels that we have there. So that was one of them. The Kubernetes side of stuff, it was good, what I call good skeptical questions. Because people are, when you're new to a technology, you're initially skeptical. Everyone is about a technology. And so having those questions about, they're really just good, honest questions about how WebAssembly works, how it can interact with things in Kubernetes, how basically WASM interacts with Kubernetes. There's a whole bunch of questions around that. And most of them are on the video if you want to hear all of them.
Thanks for that. I was mostly asking, what do I need to prepare for mentally before I answer any questions over at wasm.io? I was just, cheating, trying to steal your answers.
I think that, well, wasm.io, I guess, is a WASM specific conference, so people are probably going to be knowledgeable. But one thing that I feel like we answered really well on the second day was, somebody was asking about how WebAssembly is is still single threaded currently, and like running performance intensive things in the browser may not really work. Like it doesn't really seem like you can do real things with it. There was some more questions about threading, but one really good thing to have in the back pocket is like Google Earth, Amazon Prime, Figma renders their like entire product with WebAssembly, or they use WebAssembly. You know, Adobe's using it for Photoshop. So it is, Autodesk or AutoCAD is huge. So like there are really performance critical applications using WebAssembly in the browser, and I personally kind of gloss over the browser use case because I feel like it already works great in my brain. But that one's a good one to have in the back pocket if people question, the ability to do something high performance in the browser. Taylor, you raised your hand. Did you have another one you want to talk about?
Bailey just reminded me. I'm not sure if you announced all the WASM events coming up, Brooks, but
I try. But
the
there's
WASM
so many
events this week. We have wasm.io coming up next week for those in the EU. I think those are being recorded. ? So those might be recorded for future consumption. We're doing some fun, like we're doing a workshop there. Bailey and I are. There's a whole bunch of talks. It's going to be real fun. So wasm.io is coming up, and then we have Cloud Native WASM Day, which I think the schedule is now announced. And so thank you, Brooks. I love how Brooks has these on like speed dial. So for those who are going to be in the EU as well, those are coming up for Cloud Native WASM Day EU. And so that's something to keep an eye out on as well. And then eventually we'll get some dates for the WebAssembly Summit, which is sometime in the summer in the UK. So those are the big ones coming up here. But we will be there to talk to anybody at Cloud Native WASM Day. We love to connect with people during those times. So just wanted to call that out too. And if you're coming to wasm.io, please let us know. We'd love to talk to you there.
Yeah, next week specifically, I'm going to get to show off the work that Kevin and Roman and Steve and Victor have all been working on. We've been doing some pretty Herculean changes to support the component model and show being able to take something that knows nothing about wasmCloud and be able to run it through our system so that you can run it on any cloud, anywhere, at any scale, which is pretty cool. And I'm pairing up with that talk with a Microsoft engineer.
Super exciting stuff. I kind of had them in the pocket, but I need to just have a folder of all the upcoming events so that I can bring it up. Got a lot of stuff going on. Bailey and I are going to DevOps Days Nashville here in a couple of weeks. Before KubeCon, there's so much. All right, I'm gonna lay off before I get people panic. All right. Still in free time, anybody have anything else that they'd like to talk about in the WebAssembly or wasmCloud ecosystem? All right. Well, I think I can go ahead. I'm going to go ahead and stop the stream. Thank you, everybody, tuning in on YouTube, Twitch, Twitter, LinkedIn, all the things. Like, comment, and subscribe. See you next week. And